I secretly purchased a luxury condo, hiding it from my parents. Then a tea lunch mom announced, "We know your apartment and your sister Ice is moving in with you." I feigned indifference, but 2 weeks later when they all showed up, bam, a loud, jarring surprise. What happens when the people who raised you decide they have a right to everything you fought for, everything you've built, even your sanctuary? I never imagined my own mother would end up in handcuffs trying to force her way into my home, but trust me, the story of how we got there is far more shocking than you can even imagine. It was a Tuesday afternoon in March when I signed those closing documents. My hands were steady, but my heart was pounding with a quiet, fierce pride. This penthouse on the 42nd floor, overlooking the stunning Chicago skyline, it represented a decade of relentless effort. Floor-to-ceiling windows, gleaming floors, a kitchen with marble countertops imported from Italy. It was mine, paid in full, and I'd told absolutely no one. Not my parents, not my younger sister, nobody. That secrecy? It felt essential, almost primal. I was 33, and every single dollar for that place was earned by me. My career in pharmaceutical sales had been a grind. Entry-level rep to regional director, countless 14-hour days, weekend conferences, late-night strategy sessions. While others relied on charm, I built my success on meticulous research, solid relationships, and knowing my products inside and out. My silence about the condo stemmed from years of navigating my family's unique dynamics. Growing up, my parents celebrated every tiny step my sister Bethany took, while my accomplishments were met with casual acknowledgement at best. I graduated college with honors, and dinner was dominated by how Bethany finally passed her driving test on her 4th try. My first promotion? My dad's only comment was suggesting I help Bethany get an interview at my company because she was struggling. Bethany was 29 now, still living in my parents' basement, still expecting opportunities to just appear. She'd bounced between colleges, never finishing a degree, drifted through retail jobs, and spent most of her time cultivating a social media presence that generated more envy than income. My parents funded her lifestyle with a generosity they'd never once extended to me: car insurance, credit cards, gym memberships, you name it. I moved into my new condo on a Saturday. Professional movers, minimal but expensive furniture, abstract art, smart home tech, a security system only I knew the codes to. This building had amenities I'd only dreamed of in my cramped old apartments: a fitness center, a rooftop terrace, 24-hour concierge. The HA fees alone were more than my old rent, but I could afford them now. My neighbors were surgeons, attorneys, business owners. We exchanged polite nods. No one asked probing questions about my life or my family. The anonymity felt incredibly liberating after years of family gatherings where every aspect of my existence was up for discussion and judgment. My second bedroom became my home office, gazing out at the lake, the city lights twinkling below as I worked. This was my haven. 3 weeks after moving in, a text from my mother: "Join us for lunch Sunday." Casual, but the timing felt calculated. I'd been dodging family dinners, citing work. My absence had clearly been noted. I arrived at the restaurant at 1 p.m. My parents and Bethany were already there. My mother in her special occasion blouse, my dad's beard trimmed. Bethany, as usual, was absorbed in her phone. "Christina, darling, so glad you could make it," my mother chirped, her perfume suffocating as she hugged me. "We hardly see you anymore." "Work's been demanding," I said, settling in. New product launch, managing the regional rollout. "Always so dedicated," my father said, but his tone dripped with judgment, not praise. "Your mother and I were just telling Bethany how proud we are of both our daughters." Bethany barely glanced up, offering a thin, meaningless smile. She was wearing a designer sweater I recognized, likely 4 figures. My parents' generosity still flowing freely. We ordered, made small talk. The weather, golf, neighborhood gossip. It all felt like a preamble. I sipped my water, waiting. I knew this game. Dessert arrived before my mother finally dropped the bombshell. She set down her fork, fixing me with that look, the one from my childhood. The one that demanded my unquestioning obedience. "Christina, we need to discuss something important." She paused for dramatic effect. We know about your apartment. The restaurant noise faded to background static. I carefully set down my coffee cup, meeting her gaze head-on. My condominium, I corrected, my voice quiet but firm. Yes, your fancy new place downtown, my father interjected, his voice edged with accusation. Quite an upgrade from that little apartment you had before. You didn't even mention you were moving. I didn't realize I needed permission, I said, my tone neutral. I'm 33 years old. That's not the point, my mother insisted, leaning forward. The point is your family. Family shares important news. We had to hear about it from Barbara Hendricks at the grocery store. Apparently, her son works in real estate and handled a transaction in your building. Can you imagine how embarrassing that was? Finding out my own daughter bought a luxury condominium from a stranger. That familiar weight of guilt tried to settle on my shoulders, that old programming that insisted I owed them explanations. I fought it. Straightening my spine, I held her gaze. I wanted privacy regarding my personal decisions. Privacy, Bethany muttered, still glued to her phone. That's rich coming from Miss Perfect, who used to lecture me about responsibility. Bethany, my mother snapped, though without real conviction. She turned back to me, her expression softening into what she probably thought was maternal concern. Darling, we're not upset you bought a place. We're thrilled you're doing so well. But we think it's time you gave back to the family. Helped out your sister, who hasn't had the same advantages you have. The sheer absurdity of that statement hung in the air. We grew up in the same house, went to the same schools, had the same opportunities. The difference? I worked multiple jobs through college. She partied away freshman year before dropping out. I started at the bottom. She waited for a high-paying position to materialize. What exactly are you suggesting? I asked, though I already knew. The pattern was agonizingly familiar. My father cleared his throat, adopting his retired middle management boardroom voice. Your mother and I have been discussing Bethy's living situation. She's ready to be independent, to move out on her own. But rent in the city is astronomical, and she's still building her career as an influencer. Influencer, I repeated, unable to mask my skepticism. Bethany's social media following was mostly bots and other aspiring influencers. Her engagement rates were pathetic. Yes, my mother said firmly. She has almost 10,000 followers now. Brands are starting to notice her. She just needs the right environment to grow her platform. And you have that beautiful second bedroom that's just sitting empty. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. They wanted Bethany to move into my condominium. Not to visit. Not temporarily. To live there rent-free while. I funded her continued avoidance of actual employment. The second bedroom is my office, I said. You can work from the dining table, my mother waved her hand dismissively. Or from your bedroom. You always were adaptable. And this would just be until Bethany gets on her feet, my father added. 6 months, maybe a year. Just until her influencer income becomes more substantial. I looked at Bethany. She'd finally put down her phone, watching me with an expression of entitled expectation. She hadn't asked me herself. She hadn't even pretended to be grateful. She simply assumed I would comply, because I always had. Always accommodated. Always made room for her needs at the expense of my own. No, I said simply. My mother blinked. I'm sorry. No, I repeated, enunciating every syllable. Bethany is not moving into my condominium. Ever. Christina, don't be selfish, my father began, his face reddening. Family helps family. You have more than enough space and money. Your sister needs support. Bethany needs to support herself, I said, standing and grabbing my purse. She's 29 years old. She's had more than enough time to figure out her life. How dare you? My mother hissed, her composure finally cracking. After everything we've done for you? After we raised you and loved you, this is how you repay us? By abandoning your sister when she needs you. Other diners were staring, but I no longer cared. Years of swallowed frustration rose in my throat, demanding to be voiced. You raised us both. You loved us both. The difference is, you expected me to earn everything while handing Bethany whatever she wanted. I put myself through college. I built my career. I saved and invested and worked weekends and holidays. And now that I've finally achieved something for myself, you want me to share it with someone who has never worked for anything in her life. You always thought you were better than me, Bethany cut in, her voice sharp with resentment. Miss Career Woman. Too good for family. I thought I was entitled to the results of my own labor, I corrected. There's a difference. I placed 2 20s on the table, more than enough to cover my portion, and walked toward the exit. My mother called after me, her voice shrill with indignation, but I kept walking. The spring air felt crisp and clean after the stifling atmosphere of the restaurant. I drove home in silence, adrenaline coursing through me. The confrontation had been inevitable. My parents saw my success as a family resource, to be distributed according to their priorities. The parking garage, the elevator, the quiet elegance of my building, it all felt like a sanctuary. This was mine. I had earned it, and I would not apologize for refusing to subsidize my sister's perpetual adolescence. Inside, I made tea and stood at my windows, watching the city below. My family was probably still at the restaurant, dissecting my refusal and planning their next move. I knew my parents. One rejection wouldn't be enough. They'd keep pushing, demanding, expecting me to bend. My phone buzzed, messages from my mother, my father, even Bethany, all expressing disappointment, anger, wounded feelings. I read them once, then muted the conversation. Their words were predictable. I was selfish, ungrateful, cruel. No one acknowledged they were asking me to sacrifice my privacy and independence so Bethany could avoid the struggles I'd endured. Over the next few days, the messages continued. Voicemails from my mother with dramatic pronouncements about family loyalty. Emails from my father citing examples of successful people who helped their siblings. Bethany posted vague social media updates about betrayal and the loneliness of having no one to count on, carefully curated for sympathy. I ignored it all. I focused on work, on a new cardiovascular medication launch. The job demanded precision, expertise, qualities I had cultivated. Unlike my family, my professional colleagues respected competence and rewarded results. 2 weeks after that disastrous lunch, I returned from a business dinner to find 3 missed calls from my mother and a text that made my blood run cold. We are coming over tomorrow to discuss this properly. We will be there at 10 o'clock in the morning. No request. No acknowledgement this was my home. Just an announcement of their intended invasion. I sat on my sofa. I could be there to confront them, turn them away, but that would mean taking time off work for a conversation that would inevitably devolve into accusations. Or I could just not be home, let them knock on an unanswered door. Neither option addressed the core issue. My family fundamentally disrespected my boundaries. They believed they had a right to my home, my resources, my life. This wouldn't end with one refused visit. They would keep pushing. I needed to make my position absolutely clear, in a way they could not ignore or rationalize away. I pulled out my laptop and began researching security options. My building had standard systems, but I wanted something more robust for my unit. Something that wouldn't just alert me, but would have real consequences for anyone who tried to access my home without permission. By midnight, I had a comprehensive plan. First thing next morning, I contacted the building security director. He was sympathetic, offering solutions integrated with the building's systems. I installed additional smart locks, biometric verification, upgraded cameras with facial recognition. Most importantly, I contracted with a private security firm known for monitoring high-value properties. Their response time was under 5 minutes, with direct lines to law enforcement. The final component was the most crucial. I filed a formal trespassing notice with the Chicago Police Department, specifying that my parents and sister were not authorized to enter my property under any circumstances. The officer who took my statement asked if I was very certain, warning of serious legal consequences for my family. I assured him I was very certain. The paperwork established a clear legal boundary. If my parents or Bethany entered my condominium without permission, they wouldn't just be breaking family trust or violating my privacy. They would be committing a crime. That evening, I packed a bag and checked into a downtown hotel. I had an early meeting in the suburbs anyway, but the real reason was simpler. I wanted to be elsewhere when my family arrived. I wanted the systems I had put in place to handle their intrusion without my emotional involvement. I slept poorly, checking my phone hourly, even though the security system would alert me immediately. At 7 a.m., I showered, dressed in my best suit. My meeting was at 9. I'd be presenting clinical data when my family arrived. The timing felt appropriate, a physical manifestation of my priorities. While they focused on entitlement and shortcuts, I would be doing what I'd always done, working. The presentation went well. I stood before 12 physicians, confident, precise, fielding questions with ease. This was the world I had built for myself, where merit mattered and results spoke louder than family connections. At 10:15 a.m., my smartwatch vibrated. I glanced down discreetly, my heart rate accelerating. Motion detected at front door. Multiple individuals attempting entry. I continued my presentation without missing a beat. Years of professional discipline overriding my personal anxiety. I showed the next slide, explained mechanisms of action, discussed applications. All while my watch pulsed with updates. Unsuccessful entry attempt. Alarm triggered. Security notified. The meeting concluded at 11. I excused myself to the restroom, then checked my phone properly. The security system had captured everything. Multiple cameras recorded their arrival, their attempts to enter, the escalating frustration. My mother pressing the doorbell repeatedly, face tight with irritation. My father, arms crossed, checking his watch. Bethany leaning against the wall, scrolling through her phone, obviously bored. After 5 minutes of unanswered rings, my mother retrieved something from her purse. The camera angle showed it clearly, a key. Not just any key, but one that looked professionally cut, probably copied from a master they thought I'd left at their house. I watched in fascinated horror as my mother inserted the key. The smart system rejected it immediately, flashing red. She tried again, jiggling, pushing. Nothing. This is ridiculous, my father's voice came through on the audio. She gave us a fake key or changed the locks, my mother snapped. Which is exactly the kind of secretive behavior we should have expected. I had never given them a key. The realization settled over me like ice water. They had obtained one somehow, probably through deception, or by copying a key they thought belonged to my previous apartment. The violation felt profound. My father tried the key himself, then pulled out his wallet, attempting to slide a credit card between the door and frame. A technique that might work on a standard lock, but had no effect on my upgraded system. Bethany, meanwhile, remained engrossed in her phone, occasionally sighing with impatience. Just call her, Bethany said finally. This is stupid. We are not calling, my mother snapped. She knows we're coming. She's probably hiding inside being petty. Or she's at work like a normal person, Bethany muttered. My mother ignored her. Next, my father examined the door frame, clearly looking for weaknesses. He tried forcing the door, putting his shoulder against it. The reinforced frame didn't budge. This is absurd, my mother's voice rose. We are her parents. We have a right to be here. I don't think that's how property ownership works, Bethany observed, finally looking up from her phone. You be quiet, my mother said. This is for your benefit. What happened next unfolded with surreal quality. My father pulled out his phone and made a call. Within minutes, a man in work clothes appeared, carrying a toolkit. I recognized him from family gatherings, Dennis, my father's friend, a locksmith. They were attempting to have my locks changed, in broad daylight, on a door that was not theirs. Dennis examined the lock. This is a high-security system, integrated with the building. I can't just override it. And legally, I shouldn't be here without the owner's authorization. She's our daughter, my mother said. We have authorization. Do you have it in writing? Dennis asked, uncomfortable. We don't need it in writing. This is a family matter, my father insisted. Dennis backed away, shaking his head. I can't help you. This could get me in serious trouble. He left. My parents stood in the hallway, looking increasingly frustrated. The building security guard, Howard, appeared next. A professional, courteous man. Excuse me, he said politely. Is there a problem here? We're trying to access our daughter's apartment, my mother explained, adopting her most charming tone. She's expecting us, but she seems to have had issues with her locks. Miss Christina did not mention any scheduled visitors, Howard said, his voice firm. And she has explicitly instructed us not to allow anyone into her unit without her direct authorization. That is preposterous, my father said. We are her family. I understand, sir, but I have my instructions. I will need to ask you to leave the floor. We will do no such thing, my mother said. We have every right to be here. No, ma'am, you do not, Howard replied, his voice calm but unyielding. This is private property, and you are not authorized guests. If you do not leave voluntarily, I will need to call the police. I watched my mother's face transform. Shock gave way to indignation, then something uglier. You'd have your own mother arrested? What kind of person have you become? She wasn't speaking to Howard. She was speaking to the camera, as if she knew I was watching. Perhaps she did. Perhaps she understood that I had prepared for exactly this scenario. I am giving you one final warning, Howard said. Please leave now, or I will be forced to take further action. My father grabbed my mother's arm, trying to pull her toward the elevator. But my mother wrenched free and did something I hadn't anticipated. She began pounding on my door with both fists, shouting my name. Christina, open this door right now. This is your mother. You cannot treat us this way. Bethany stepped back, embarrassment finally overriding her usual indifference. Mom, stop. This is crazy. But my mother was beyond reason, pounding and shouting, her voice echoing through the hallway. Other residents began opening their doors, drawn by the commotion. My neighbors, now witnesses to my family's complete meltdown. Howard pulled out his radio and spoke into it quietly. Within 2 minutes, 2 more security guards appeared, followed shortly by 2 Chicago police officers. The police officers were professional and calm. Their presence immediately changed the energy. My mother fell silent mid-rant, her face flushing as she registered the uniforms. What seems to be the problem here? The first officer asked, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and an air of patient authority. Howard explained concisely, these individuals have been attempting to gain unauthorized entry to one of our units. The owner has explicit instructions that they are not to be admitted. When asked to leave, they refused and became disruptive. We are her parents, my mother said, her voice shaking with a mix of anger and fear. She is being unreasonable. We just want to talk to her. Is the owner present? The officer asked Howard. No, ma'am. She is at work. The officer turned to my parents. Do you have written permission to be here? We don't need permission, my father said, his bluster diminished. She's our daughter. That is not how property law works, sir, the officer replied. Do you live at this address? No, but then you are trespassing, she said simply. The property owner has the right to determine who enters her home. If she has denied you access, you need to respect that. This is insane, my mother said, looking at the gathered neighbors as if seeking allies. Can you believe this? A daughter locking out her own family. No one spoke. The other residents watched with expressions ranging from discomfort to disapproval, but that disapproval seemed directed at my family, not at me. The second officer, younger and built like he spent time in the gym, checked something on his phone. Ma'am, sir, I am showing that a formal trespassing notice was filed for this address 3 days ago, naming you specifically. That means you are legally notified that you are not welcome here. Your presence constitutes criminal trespass. The color drained from my mother's face. Criminal. Trespass? That is absurd. She is our daughter. That does not grant you access to her property, the officer said. You need to leave now. If you refuse, we will place you under arrest. I sat in my car in the hospital parking lot, watching this unfold on my phone. Part of me felt sick, seeing my parents humiliated in front of strangers. But a larger part felt vindicated. They had pushed and pushed, assuming I would eventually bend. Now they were facing actual consequences. My father took my mother's arm again. Let's go. This is not worth it. Not worth it, my mother repeated, her voice rising. She is family. She shouldn't be allowed to just cut us out. Ma'am, the female officer said, her tone hardening. You need to leave immediately. I will not, my mother said. I watched in disbelief as she crossed her arms and planted her feet. Not until my daughter agrees to see us. We have rights. You have the right to remain silent, the officer said. I realized with a shock that she was actually going to arrest my mother. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You cannot be serious, my father said, stepping between the officer and my mother. This is a family dispute, not a police matter. Sir, step back, the younger officer said, moving forward. Do not interfere with an arrest. What happened next unfolded with the jerky unreality of a nightmare. My father refused to step back. The officers gave him multiple warnings. My mother continued to shout about her rights, about ungrateful children, about the deterioration of family values. Bethany stood frozen against the wall, her phone clutched in her hand, face pale with shock. For once in her life, she seemed to understand the situation had spiraled beyond her control. The officers moved simultaneously. The female officer guided my mother's arms behind her back, producing handcuffs with practiced efficiency. My mother screamed, an incoherent sound of rage and disbelief. My father lunged forward, trying to pull the officer away from my mother, and the younger officer intercepted him, taking him to the ground in a controlled maneuver that looked painful but professional. Within 30 seconds, both my parents were in handcuffs. My mother was sobbing now, her defiance collapsing into hiccuping cries about how this was all wrong, how I had done this to them, how I was destroying our family. My father said nothing, face red, eyes fixed on the floor. Bethany Louise, don't just stand there, my mother wailed. Call our lawyer. Call someone. Bethany fumbled with her phone, her hands shaking. I don't know who to call, Mom. We don't have a lawyer. Then call your sister. Make her stop this. The irony would have been funny if it weren't so tragic. Even now, handcuffed and being arrested, my mother expected me to solve the problem, to make everything go away, to sacrifice myself for the family's comfort. The officers led my parents toward the elevator. Howard held the door open, his face carefully neutral. I could see several neighbors watching from their doorways, witnesses to the complete implosion of my family's attempt to invade my home. Before the elevator doors closed, my mother looked directly at the camera, as though she could see through it to wherever I was watching. I hope you're happy, Christina, she said, her voice raw. I hope this is what you wanted, because you have just destroyed your family. The doors closed on her words, and the hallway fell silent. Bethany remained standing against the wall, her face streaked with tears. Howard approached her gently. Miss, you need to leave as well. I know, Bethany said quietly. I just need a minute. She wiped her face with her sleeve, a gesture so uncharacteristically childlike, I felt an unwelcome pang of sympathy. Then she looked up at the camera. When she spoke, her voice was clearer than I'd ever heard it. I didn't want this, she said. Any of it. I just wanted to live my life. But they kept pushing you and you kept giving in. And I guess they thought that would never stop. I guess we all thought that. She pushed away from the wall and walked to the elevator without looking back. I sat in my car for a long time after the feed went dark, my hands trembling despite the warmth of the afternoon sun through the windshield. I had won. I had established my boundaries in the most definitive way possible. My parents would face charges, probably a fine at minimum, possibly probation. They would have criminal records for trespassing, a permanent consequence for their refusal to respect my autonomy. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt hollow. As though I'd just watched a bridge burn with everyone I'd ever known standing on the other side. I drove back to my condominium in the late afternoon. The drive gave me time to process, to move beyond initial shock into something more complicated. The security system had worked exactly as designed. My boundaries had held. The consequences I'd warned about had materialized. The parking garage felt different now. I took the elevator to the 42nd floor, half expecting some remnant of the confrontation. But the hallway was pristine. The building staff had cleaned away any evidence. Inside my condominium, everything was exactly as I had left it. The windows framed the city skyline in golden afternoon light. My furniture stood undisturbed. The sanctuary I had worked so hard to create remained inviolate. I sat down, pulled up the full security footage on my television, watching the entire sequence. My parents' arrival, their progressively aggressive attempts to enter, the locksmith, Howard's intervention, the police. What struck me most was not my mother's breakdown or my father's physical intervention or even the arrests. It was Bethany's face in those final moments. She looked tired. Not just physically, but existentially weary, as though she'd been playing a role for so long she'd forgotten how to stop. My phone had been buzzing all afternoon. Calls and messages from extended family who had heard about the arrests. My parents had immediately started calling relatives from the police station, spinning a narrative where they were the victims of my cruelty. Aunt Patricia, I can't believe you had your own parents arrested. Uncle James, your mother is devastated. She raised you better than this. Cousin Melissa, family is everything. How could you? I read through them all, recognizing the pattern. My parents had always been skilled at controlling the narrative, presenting themselves as loving and generous while portraying me as difficult and ungrateful. The difference now? There was video evidence. Documentation that couldn't be explained away. I drafted a single message and sent it to every family member who had contacted me. I purchased a condominium with money I earned. I did not invite anyone to move in with me. When my family attempted to enter my home without permission, after being explicitly told they were not welcome, I enforced standard trespassing laws that apply to everyone. If you would like to see the security footage of them attempting to break in and then refusing to leave when asked by both building security and police, I am happy to share it. Otherwise, please respect my privacy. I attached a 20-second clip showing my mother pounding on the door and my father attempting to force entry. Then I muted the group conversation and set my phone aside. The evening stretched before me, empty and quiet. I made dinner, a simple pasta dish, and ate standing at the counter while the city lights began twinkling below. This was supposed to be my victory. The moment I finally established my independence and freedom from family dysfunction. So why did it feel so much like loss? The answer came as I was rinsing my plate. It felt like loss because it was loss. I had lost the fantasy that my family might someday see me as I actually was, recognize my worth without trying to extract value from it. I had lost the hope that my parents might eventually treat me and Bethany with equal respect, might stop enabling her while demanding more from me. Those losses hurt, but they were losses of illusions, not of anything real. The relationships I had mourned had never actually existed, except in my imagination and desperate hope. My phone rang. Bethany. I hesitated, then answered. Christina. Her voice was small, uncertain. I'm here. They're being charged with criminal trespass. Dad, too, because he tried to stop the cops from arresting Mom. Their court date is in 3 weeks. I know. Silence stretched. I could hear her breathing. Why did you do it? She asked finally. Why not just talk to them? Tell them no again. I did tell them no, I said quietly. At lunch. Clearly and definitively. They chose not to accept that answer. They chose to show up at my home uninvited. They chose to attempt to break in when I wasn't there. They chose to refuse to leave when asked by building security and police. Every step of this was their choice. They thought you were bluffing, Bethany said. They thought you would never actually let them get arrested. I know. More silence. I didn't want to move in with you. Just so you know. I have my own life. Weird as it is. They decided that for me, like they always decide things for me. Like I'm still 12 and can't make my own choices. This surprised me. Then why did you go along with it? Because fighting them is exhausting, she said simply. You know that. You fought them your whole life. I just gave up and let them run things. It was easier. How did that work out for you? She laughed, a sound without humor. I'm 29 years old, living in my parents' basement with no degree and no real job prospects. So, not great. I guess you could change that. Maybe, she said. Maybe not. But at least now I know where you stand. No more wondering if you might cave if they push hard enough. No, I agreed. No more wondering. For what it's worth, Bethany said, her voice going even quieter. I don't think you did the wrong thing. I think you did what you needed to do. I just wish it didn't come to this. Me too. I should go. Mom's calling me from the other room. She wants me to convince you to drop the charges. That's not how criminal charges work. The state is prosecuting. I can't drop anything. I'll tell her that. She probably won't listen. Bethany paused. Take care of yourself, Christina. You too, Bethany. The line went dead. I was alone again in my beautiful condominium, surrounded by everything I had worked for and sacrificed to achieve. The city sprawled below me. Millions of people navigating their own complicated relationships with family and autonomy. The impossible balance between loyalty and self-preservation. The next 3 weeks passed with surreal normalcy. I went to work, attended meetings, managed my team as though nothing had changed. But everything had. The absence of my family's constant demands created space I had forgotten could exist. Room to breathe and think, without the perpetual weight of their expectations. The extended family's response evolved from initial outrage to grudging silence as more people watched the security footage I had shared. Seeing my parents attempt to break into my home, watching my mother's theatrical breakdown, observing my father's physical aggression toward police officers, these things were difficult to rationalize away. The narrative my parents had constructed of a cruel daughter punishing her loving family crumbled under the weight of visual evidence. My Aunt Patricia called to apologize. I shouldn't have jumped to conclusions, she said. Your mother made it sound like you had them arrested for just showing up. She didn't mention the breaking and entering attempt or refusing to leave. Thank you for saying that. For what it's worth, I think you've been remarkably patient with them over the years. More patient than I would have been. Other relatives followed suit. Some apologizing, others just stopping their messages of condemnation. A few sided firmly with my parents, accepting their version despite the video. I blocked those numbers and moved on. At work, I threw myself into the new product launch with renewed focus. Without the constant drain of family drama, I found I had energy for strategic thinking, for mentoring younger reps, for building partnerships. My supervisor noticed. He mentioned I was being considered for a promotion to senior director, a substantial salary increase, and equity. I met with my financial advisor. The condominium had been an excellent purchase. We talked about diversifying my portfolio, long-term wealth building. For the first time in my adult life, I was planning my financial future without factoring in potential demands from family members. 3 days before the court date, my mother called. I almost didn't answer. Curiosity won out. Christina. Her voice was subdued, lacking its usual commanding tone. We need to talk. I'm listening. The lawyer says we're going to be convicted. Criminal trespass is apparently very straightforward, especially with video evidence and the police reports. He says the best we can hope for is a fine and probation, but it will be on our permanent record. That sounds accurate. This will ruin us, she said. For the first time, I heard genuine fear in her voice. Your father volunteers at the community center. They do background checks. He'll lose that. And I'll lose my position on the library board. We'll be criminals. You committed a crime, I said simply. This is the consequence. But it was just about family, she protested. We weren't trying to rob you or hurt anyone. We just wanted to talk to you. By breaking into my home, I cut in. By refusing to leave when asked by security and police. By attacking an officer who was trying to arrest you. Your father physically grabbed a police officer who was performing a lawful arrest. That is assault on an officer. He's lucky they're not charging him with that as well. Silence. Then, in a voice so quiet I almost didn't hear it, what do you want from us? The question hung heavy. What did I want? An apology would be meaningless. A promise to respect my boundaries would be equally hollow. I want you to accept responsibility for your choices, I said. I want you to stop expecting me to sacrifice myself for Bethany's comfort. I want you to understand that I am not a family resource to be allocated according to your priorities. We are your parents, she said. We gave you everything. You gave me the same things you gave Bethany. The difference is that you expected me to be grateful and compliant while allowing her to be entitled and independent. You created this dynamic, not me. So you'll just let us be convicted? Let us have criminal records, destroy our reputations. In the community, I filed a police report because you committed a crime. What happens next is between you and the legal system. She made a sound that might have been a sob or a laugh. You have become so cold, so hard. This is not the daughter I raised. You're right, I agreed. The daughter you raised would have given in. Let Bethany move in. sacrificed her own peace and privacy to avoid conflict. That daughter died somewhere around the 43rd time she accommodated your demands at her own expense. What you have now is a woman who knows her worth and defends her boundaries. If you find that cold, perhaps you should examine why you preferred the alternative. I ended the call before she could respond. The court hearing took place on a Thursday morning. I didn't attend. No legal obligation, no personal desire to watch. I learned about it secondhand through a text from Bethany. Guilty on all counts. Mom and Dad got 6 months probation, $500 fine each, and mandatory community service. They're devastated. I read the message in my office, spreadsheets open, coffee growing cold. I felt no satisfaction in their conviction, but no guilt either. The legal system had functioned as designed. Bethany sent a follow-up message. They want to know if you'll talk to them now. I considered this. Part of me wanted complete separation, to build my life without any connection to people who had demonstrated such disrespect. But another part recognized that complete estrangement would be its own kind of prison. I called Bethany instead of texting. Hey, she answered. What do they want to talk about? I think they want to apologize. Really apologize, not just say words to manipulate you. The lawyer was pretty brutal in explaining how badly they messed up, and I think it actually got through. Or they want me to help them avoid the consequences somehow. Maybe, Bethany admitted, but I don't think so. They looked really shaken at the courthouse, like they finally understood this is real. I thought about it, weighing my options. Tell them I'll meet them in a public place, with you present. 1 hour, 1 conversation. If they try to guilt-trip me or make demands, I'll leave immediately. Fair enough. I'll tell them. We met 4 days later at a coffee shop near the Botanical Gardens. Neutral territory. I arrived early, chose a table where I could see the entrance. Old habits. My parents arrived together. I was struck by how diminished they looked. My father had aged, new lines around his eyes, a slight stoop. My mother wore minimal makeup, her hair pulled back simply. They looked like what they were, people who had faced consequences they'd never imagined possible. Bethany arrived last, sliding into the seat beside me. A subtle alignment. A quiet statement about where she stood. Thank you for meeting us, my father said, his voice formal. We know you didn't have to. You have an hour, I said. I suggest you use it well. My mother twisted her napkin. We've been talking to a therapist. The court required it for probation, but we've been going to extra sessions trying to understand how things got so bad. And what has the therapist told you? That we've been using you as a surrogate parent for your sister, my father said bluntly. That we failed to give Bethany the skills she needed to be independent because it was easier to rely on you to pick up the slack. That we treated your success as a family resource instead of recognizing it as your personal achievement. The words sounded rehearsed, but beneath that, I heard something resembling genuine understanding. We were wrong, my mother said, finally looking directly at me. Wrong to expect you to let Bethany move in. Wrong to try to break into your home. Wrong to refuse to leave when asked. Wrong to prioritize her comfort over your boundaries. Wrong about all of it. Why? I asked. Why did you do it? She looked at my father, then back at me. Because it was easier. Because Bethany struggles with things that came easily to you. And it seemed cruel to let her fail when you were right there, capable of helping. Because we told ourselves we were keeping the family together. But what we were really doing was avoiding the hard work of teaching her to stand on her own. And it wasn't fair to you, my father added. We can see that now. We made you responsible for problems that were not yours to solve. Bethany spoke for the first time. They've been in therapy sessions with me too, talking about my patterns, my avoidance, my dependence. It's been pretty brutal, honestly, but necessary. What happens now? I asked. We fulfill our probation requirements, my mother said. We continue therapy. We learn to be better parents, even though our children are already grown. And we hope that someday you might be willing to have a relationship with us again. Not the old relationship, where we made demands and you accommodated. Something new. Something healthier. Where we respect your boundaries and appreciate you for who you are. I sat back, processing this. They looked sincere. They sounded sincere. But words were easy. Change was hard. I need time, I said finally. Time to see if this is real or just a performance to get back into my good graces. That's fair, my father said. We understand. 6 months passed before I agreed to another meeting. During that time, I watched from a distance as my parents followed through on their commitments. My father completed his community service at a food bank, logging twice the required hours. My mother attended therapy weekly and began volunteering at a women's shelter, working with residents on job skills. Bethany moved out of my parents' basement into a modest apartment with a roommate. She got an administrative assistant job at a marketing firm, entry-level, but it provided structure and experience. Her social media became less curated, more authentic, showing her actual life instead of an aspirational fantasy. She was building something real, finally, even if it was small and imperfect. When I finally agreed to dinner with my parents, it was at a restaurant of my choosing at a time convenient for my schedule. These details mattered. They demonstrated that the power dynamic had shifted, that my needs would be centered. The evening was awkward, but genuine. My parents asked about my work, my life, my interests, and actually listened to the answers. They shared updates about their own lives without making demands or dropping hints about how I could help. When my father mentioned Bethany was struggling with her car payment, my mother immediately changed the subject, a conscious course correction that I recognized and appreciated. "We're proud of you," my mother said as dessert arrived. "We should have been saying that all along." Without qualifications or comparisons. "Just proud of who you are and what you've built." "Thank you," I said simply. We didn't become a close family overnight. Healing from years of dysfunction required more than a few dinners and therapy sessions. But we established something workable. A relationship based on mutual respect rather than obligation and guilt. I saw my parents every few months for lunch or dinner. Bethany and I developed our own relationship, separate from our parents, occasional coffee dates where we talked about our lives without the weight of old resentments. I never invited any of them to my condominium. That space remained mine. Alone. A sanctuary I had fought to protect. They never asked to visit, understanding that some boundaries were permanent. My career continued to flourish. I received the promotion to senior director, then advanced again to vice president of the Midwest region. I bought a small vacation property in Wisconsin, a lake house where I spent summer weekends reading and kayaking. I dated occasionally, but never seriously, content with the life I had built. The story of my family's arrest spread. A cautionary tale about boundaries and consequences. Some people saw me as cold and unforgiving. Others recognized me as someone who had finally valued herself enough to demand respect. I stopped worrying about which narrative people believed. 5 years after the incident, I ran into my old building security guard, Howard, at a restaurant downtown. He recognized me immediately. "You probably don't remember me," he began. "Of course I do," I said. "You helped me establish very important boundaries." He smiled, relieved. "I've thought about that day many times. Wondered if I did the right thing. If I could have handled it differently." "You did exactly what I needed you to do," I assured him. "You enforced my rights when my own family wouldn't respect them. That mattered more than you know." "I'm glad," he said. "I have daughters of my own. And I've tried to teach them what I learned from watching you. That they don't owe anyone access to their lives, not even family. That boundaries are healthy and necessary." After he left, I sat with my drink and thought about the woman I had been 5 years ago, standing in that restaurant with my family, demanding I sacrifice my home and privacy. That woman had been afraid, uncertain whether she had the right to protect what she had earned. The woman I was now had no such doubts. The arrests and convictions had consequences that extended far beyond the legal penalties. My parents lost several social connections, people who couldn't reconcile the image of respectable community members with individuals who had criminal records for breaking into their daughter's home. My father eventually resigned from his volunteer position, not because they asked him to, but because he felt the weight of judgment every time he showed up. My mother stepped down from the library board for similar reasons. They moved to a smaller house in a different neighborhood, a fresh start where fewer people knew their story. But the shame followed them anyway, as it should. They had violated fundamental principles of respect and consent, and those violations came with social costs that no amount of therapy could completely erase. As for me, I stood at my floor-to-ceiling windows 5 years later, watching the Chicago skyline glitter in the evening light, and felt only peace. The price of protecting myself had been high, but the cost of continuing to sacrifice my own well-being would have been infinitely higher. Sometimes, comeuppance isn't about elaborate schemes or dramatic confrontations. Sometimes, it's simply about refusing to accept less than you deserve, about enforcing boundaries, even when everyone insists you're wrong to have them. My family had learned that I meant what I said, that my no was final, and that lesson had been worth every uncomfortable moment. Have you ever had to draw a firm line with your family or faced similar pressures? What did you do, and how did it turn out? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd really love to hear your experiences.